Here at Spoonful of Strength, we want to make this podcast interactive. We want to hear your stories and we want you involved in our conversations. Follow Spoonful of Strength on Instagram, where we will post questions throughout the week. Your answers may be shared on our podcast. Do you have a story to share? Send us a message on Spoonful of Strength on Instagram with your health journey, and we may interview you on this show. Welcome to Spoonful of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them, where we talk all things chronic. Here's your host, Rachel and Tina. Welcome to Spoonful of Strength. How are you doing today, Tina?
It is a great day here. Very, very hot, though. How about you?
I think you're about a day behind us because it's been very, very hot. But today we've got a little break in the temperature, but we've got some storms coming through. So you'll probably see those in the next day or so. But how have you been feeling with your back?
Surprisingly, I think that the my injection, that second injection, seems to be helping. I did a road trip all the way to Greensboro this past weekend and back, and in the past, over the last 6 months or so, I could manage maybe 30 minutes of driving before I was in pain, but I actually was able to successfully get all the way down there and back without having any issues. So I'm
Oh, that's
hopeful. It's a little
good.
sore today because I did have PT yesterday and he added three new exercises. So I'm noticing that I'm feeling it the day after whenever he adds something new into the
Yeah.
mix. But I think that's a good thing because that means that we're working on, we're getting
Yeah.
those muscles stronger. So
Didn't you text me that it was a good PT day and everything was going good? And then you texted me later and said, oh, wait, no, he added more. Did you
he
go
added
into it
more.
thinking it was going to be
Yeah,
an
yeah.
easier
Originally,
class?
I thought I was just gonna have to get my that we're doing some custom orthotics too to help support my support my feet, which in turn will support my back more. So I was thinking that that's all I was going to get away with doing, and then afterwards he tossed in three new exercises. But he actually is also
Yeah, they're
very
sneaky like
happy with
that.
my progress. So.
Oh,
So
that's
I'm getting
great.
there. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. So, of course,
Good.
I'm hoping that
Good.
it's actually that I'm healing in addition to
Yeah.
the epidural working, and it's not just that the epidural is working
Right.
and it's masking everything. So we'll see when it's time to reassess everything how much stronger I've grown.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it masks the pain so that you can get stronger and while you've
Make it
got
a little
that
bit easier to
that
do
going
more,
for
get
you.
away with more reps
Yeah.
and things. Does the heat affect how your MS symptoms are?
Yes. I've even noticed with my physical therapy, I mean, the exercises I do in physical therapy are like minimal. In fact, they've talked to me about whether it's doing any good or is it doing more harm. But I can tell on days where it's hot out, it just drains your energy. It just, um, any energy you have when you leave the house, it's like it sucks up like two or three more times what it would on a nice day. And even if I stay home, just like letting the dogs in and out and just even doing that, I can feel a difference in the way that I feel. So yeah, I've had to miss a couple of my son's baseball games,
Mm.
just because it's too hot and it ruins me for a few days after. So um, but hopefully the temperatures will calm down a little bit. So well, let's talk about who we've got on our podcast today. I am really excited about our guest. Her name is Gia Mora. She's an actor. I have to say, first of all, isn't her name like that's just an actress's name, Gia Mora? It's just
Yeah.
like, it's just like the perfect name for an actor. But she is an actor. She is a writer, and she writes about climate focused stories. And she actually had an article about her illness and the steps in getting the diagnosis published on HuffPost. So we're going to link that here. She has hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And reading through just her bio before I even have a chance to talk to her, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because the amount of broken bones that she had as a child is unbelievable. And it took until she was in her 20s or 30s before a doctor actually questioned, that this may not be normal. And so she's going to go through her life and all the challenges that she faces, including breaking her jaw while on stage by smiling. So we'll let her tell that story, but let's bring her in. Welcome, Gia, to our podcast here. We are very interested in knowing a little bit more about your health journey, as well as some of the things that you're passionate about currently. And so let's start out here and just have you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Gia Mora. I'm a Colorado native, but I've been in LA for a long time now, over a decade. I spent most of my career as an actor in musical theater, and I've transitioned in the past 4 years to my passion for sustainability. The thing that I loved my whole life, I never understood could be a career path because I was always on the trajectory to be a performer, and I was always a performer. But then when the pandemic hit and everything changed, what that looked like, my passion for the environment, for animals, and for creating a better future for everybody started to come together with my communication skills. And I've actually found a lot of excitement and connection to people doing this sustainability journalism work that I'm doing now. So that's kind of my work history. But yeah, I live in Southern California, and I will put a temporary billboard in here for Los Angeles for migraineurs, which I found out I live in LA. I didn't come to LA for my migraines, but let me tell you, going back to Colorado and being in an environment where there's a lot of changes in barometric pressure, if you are sensitive to those things, it makes that environment very difficult. But when I come back to California, I don't have as many problems. So I really do love to be here in LA.
So you've been experiencing some hypermobility, pain, and broken bones ever since you were a child. Can you walk us through a little bit of your childhood and how things started happening?
Yeah. So I had no idea what was happening to me starting when I was very small. I know the first broken bone was at age 3. I got mad at something and I hit the towel rack with my hand and I broke my wrist. And my mother was terrified that the Child Protective Services was going to come and take me away because how did this 3-year-old break her hand just bumping her arm? And the doctor at the time diagnosed me as being half Irish and half Italian and very, very angry, which is not an appropriate diagnosis, funny enough, not the cause of bone fragility. Even though maybe ethnically there is something to it, but it wasn't. I mean, I was probably a very sprightly little 3-year-old, but that really wasn't the problem. And then the older I got, I had a lot of other joint issues. Every time I went to go outside and play, I would get injured in some way, shape, or form. I broke wrists and ankles left and right. I broke both of my elbows in elementary school. By the time I was 12, I was getting really severe migraines that were landing me in the hospital because I would lose vision. I had no idea that any of these symptoms were related at all, right? You're, as a kid, you don't know any of this. And all of these things continued my joint injuries, and then the pain and the fatigue from all of those things were continuing to plague me. As an adult, I had graduated from college and I was working as an actor. And when I was like around 19 or 20, and I broke my jaw on stage smiling, which was again very surprising. And again, had no idea that it was related to my wrist when I was 3 or the migraines that I would get, any of these things, that they were all together. Anyway, so my career in musical theater was becoming more and more difficult because my knees were killing me, my ankles were killing me. I was getting injured. I had to be replaced in a couple of shows, and I was really dancing a lot because as someone with hypermobility, I have excellent extension, and I'm pretty tall, so I've got long limbs. I had trained as a dancer for many years, so like all of these things, the skill set that my body had being very flexible was in great use. But I was like a greyhound. Like you're only going to run me for so long before they're going to put you down, and that's a sad reality about the body. But when you tax it that much, and if you don't have what I don't have, which is proper collagen production, that could be a problem. So the broken jaw was sort of the beginning understanding of the connection between the headache, the migraine, and the bone, because it was very much connected. The broken bones equal migraines for the first time. It took another 15 years to get a true diagnosis of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so my journey, I guess, which would technically be like 37 years or something like that, is a little bit longer than average, but many people spend between 10 and 20 years getting a diagnosis for this disorder. And yet, hypermobility is quite common. Right now, hypermobile EDS is still listed as a rare disease because it's classified as something that 1 in 5,000 people have. But the most recent research coming out of the UK is one study found it was between 1 in 600 and 900 people who had hypermobility.
Wow.
That it is significantly more common. So it's a disease that people talk about as being chronically underdiagnosed because so many more people are likely affected by it. But they have these incredibly disparate symptoms. And I have almost no GI symptoms, but GI, fatigue, and pain are the three biggest symptoms that people report. And so I'm lucky that my GI tract is one of my few working systems in my body that does want to appropriately function. But yeah, so the discovery of all of this, so such a long story, I'm so sorry. But the discovery of all of this, then eventually, I saw the doctor, got the diagnosis. I was immediately dismissed. It's HEDS. It's just like fibromyalgia. It means nothing. It's just a label to slap on it. But there's nothing to be done about it, and there's nobody we can send you to. So, because rheumatologists don't deal with it either, even though it's a joint issue. Orthopedists only deal with it if they want to cut you open, which I've had my plenty of share of those as well.
Right.
But so I was kind of left, and then I just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I just was like, I spent 5 years basically thinking, well, there's nothing to be done about it, and yet I'm continuing to feel more and more terrible. And I'm getting older, but I mean, I'm not even in my 40s yet. What's happening? Like, this isn't even like, this shouldn't count. And then there it was, like, boom, 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 here you are. You have a diagnosis and you can do something about it called your own your own research, even if your primary care or your other doctors aren't going to do anything about it. And that started me about a year ago on this entire journey, to which I found out that I not only have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I do indeed have a bone fragility disorder, the genetic bone fragility disorder. It is so rare, it does not yet have a name. Right now, it is still an unnamed, a gene of, uncertain significance, I think is the technical term for it. So right now it falls in a category of the 10% of people who have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is also a collagen disorder, just like hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. But the gene that causes that is not a collagen 1A or 2A gene like it is traditionally in osteogenesis imperfecta. It's on another gene called the SUCO, but that's also responsible for collagen production. So not only does my collagen in all of my connective tissue not properly promote itself and replace itself and build itself, but that happens inside of my bones too. So that's, for a lot of people with osteogenesis imperfecta, it doesn't take hitting your wrist on a the towel rack. Most kids with osteogenesis imperfecta have a lot of long bone breaks, like their femurs break when somebody bumps them in their wheelchair, right? Like they are extraordinarily fragile. Most people with osteogenesis imperfecta are also of abnormally small stature. So I am this incredibly rare mixed phenotype because I'm tall for a woman. I have EDS and I have osteogenesis imperfecta. Like it is this very, I mean, I want to give myself to a scientist to be like, please study me because I'm clearly a little, weirdo, and you need to know more about why I'm so weird so you can help other people. And then that took me down a whole other diagnostic path, which gave me the fibromyalgia diagnosis, which also then has given me this new, apparently the reason I don't sleep and the fatigue is so bad is also because I have a form of sleep epilepsy. So, I think like a lot of people with chronic illness, when you pull one thread and you ask one question about one thing, what you realize is all of the things that you have been served on a platter that you don't realize are on the same plate. You think it's like tapas style. It's actually just like one giant server. That was a really bad metaphor. I talked about pulling a string and then all of a sudden I'm like at a dinner table thinking about pizza. But like it's really, you start to get a bigger picture. In other words, you really, I think chronic illness exposes just how siloed we've come to understand our healthcare in these systems and not as holistic groups of how body parts and systems work together to function, to make your brain, your body, your soul, all those systems talk to each other and give you a day-to-day experience that makes you happy to be in the world.
Yeah. It's amazing. A lot of people with chronic illness, once they get that first diagnosis, then they start to see other diagnoses. And I see that a lot, in Instagram groups and things like that. They list everything they've got, and it can just be, it can be so complicated. And I know I've been told myself, you're a complicated case. I'm sure you've heard that as well. But going back a little bit, at any point within your childhood with so many broken bones, did any doctor think that anything was out of the norm, or did they just chalk it up to you being rowdy and clumsy?
Yes, it was really a clumsy klutz. It was like, why are you letting her play soccer? Why is she still dancing? You should take her out of gymnastics. And yeah, that was probably true, but that wasn't the problem. Is that your kid should be able to play soccer at recess and not wind up with a broken ankle every time, right? That should be the problem, not just don't put the kid in the soccer field. Right. So I think there was a lot of that going on, and no one ever, I mean, not until I saw the ankle surgeon that I have now after the second ankle shatter in the 2010s. Because I've had two of them in the past decade. And that doctor was like, I have never seen the kind of damage in your ankle except in a bad car accident. That is abnormal. Like the fracture was so bad relative to the injury that was the first time that someone ever, and I was in my 30s, someone finally said, that's not right.
As you've gotten older, it sounds like growing up, childhood, there's a lot of broken bones. Is that something that you're still dealing with frequently as you were in your early years?
Thankfully, not as frequently. I haven't broken anything for a couple of years. I have had to severely restrict the activities that I do because when I fall, I do break. And I was having some fainting issues and I was breaking things when I was fainting too. So then that's when I started getting deeply concerned, because now it's not just, do you want to go play soccer, or, oh, you can't ski, or, oh, you shouldn't do. No, definitely don't do any of those things. But also maybe don't take a shower by yourself. Like that's where the change also happened too. Yeah.
We thought we'd take a brief pause in our podcast to enjoy what I call a mini mindful moment. Now, mindfulness is, if you're not familiar with the concept, that is the practice of just being present in this particular moment in time. We're not thinking about things that have happened in the past. We're not thinking of things that are coming up. We're simply in this here and now. So I encourage you to join us on a little mindful moment here as I guide you through how to quiet your mind. One of my favorite techniques of that is simply become focused on my breath. So if you settle in, close your eyes, try to quiet your mind, and simply focus on taking a nice deep breath in through your nose, feeling it all the way down from your diaphragm all the way up, and hold it. And then release that breath through the mouth. One big, long breath out. And there should be no other thoughts going through your mind. Just simply focus on breathing in. Nice, deep breath in through the nose. And hold it. And deep breath out through your mouth, releasing all that tension in your body, feeling yourself connected to nothing more than your body and your mind. You hear any outside noises, just simply push them away. Only concentrate on that breath. Deep breath in, hold it, and a nice long breath out. And if you find your mind starting to wander, just bring it back to focusing on nothing more than the process of those deep breath in all the way through the very bottom of your pit of your stomach, all the way up into your lungs. Nice and deep breath, and hold it. And a nice deep breath out. Simply quieting your mind and focusing only on those nice deep breaths in and a long breath out. And then take just a couple seconds, a few more breaths on your own. I won't guide you through these. If you find your mind starting to wander, just bring it right back to just focusing on the breath and nothing more. Give you a couple seconds to do a few deep breaths. And on your last exhale, nice deep exhale, and open your eyes and come back to the present moment and join us back on the remainder of our podcast.
We do want to recognize the fact that you had an article published in HuffPost, and we're going to link that in the podcast so that everybody can read upon that. But you mentioned something as far as how that affected your relationships when you were in your 20s and college and all of that. Can you kind of go into, just how much that impacted your relationships?
Absolutely. So that year that I broke my jaw, I was sick for 6 months. I just could not get better. And I don't think I had had jaw surgery to put the disc had dislocated and lodged into the muscle wall of my face. So they put that back in and put a stirrup to hold it back in place. I had a secondary infection. My eardrum exploded And I was just sick for like, I just could not get better. Like nobody could understand why I just could not get well. And it was 6 months. And that boy out, that's where it started. That boyfriend, definitely could not like even come close to caring for me in that sort of situation. Like if you're young, that's a big ask of someone, although he was older, and it's just a big ask of anybody, but certainly somebody you're like, here's your teenage girlfriend. Would you like to care for her? And so that was the first time I saw how the second, like when the marriage vows of like for in sickness and in health, there's a reason that's in there, because health can get pretty scary pretty fast. And when you're young and you think you're invincible, everything seems like it's going to be fine, but then something actually puts the pedal to the metal and you have to really see what that means. And you can see how people are less inclined to do that, because it's a big ask to care for someone when they're ill like that. And I had a long time boyfriend who was a terrible person, and he did not understand what I was going through at all. He didn't understand the smell sensitivities that I had, or like what a migraine meant when I mean that I spend 3 days in a dark room and I can't have noise or food or somebody talking to me. Like that just in the decade I spent with that guy, he never got that. And then when I started dating other people, I had, this was in my early 30s. I was getting worse and worse. I was having trouble even like climbing up the stairs because I was in such pain with my knees and my back. Oh my God, my ankles. And he had also been a dancer and he'd also had knee surgery. So he felt like he understood what I was going through. And he was like, I don't know what's wrong with you, and I want to have children. And you don't look like you could have children because you look too sick. And the fact of the matter was, there's no way I could have been. I mean, like you could have had children, whether or not you could be caring for them or instead of being in bed the whole time. That is a true statement, but boy, did that just stab like a knife to think, oh, you're not just saying no to me, you're saying no to my body, which I thought was the one thing. Like if you care about someone, like, oh, what they look like, or if they're in a wheelchair, or if they have gray hair or no hair, you don't care. And you realize actually that is something people do care about quite a bit. And now my wonderful, sweet, darling other half, he also deals with chronic pain because he was in a very bad motorcycle accident and nearly lost his foot. And one of the things that we bonded over the most was about how people do not understand what chronic pain is, especially when you don't look, quote unquote, sick. And that was a huge bonding connection point for me. And bless his sweetheart, I'm recording this with you from bed because I was out yesterday, so I have to spend today in bed because I can barely walk. And he brought my computer and he brought my headset. Aww. And he does do all of those things to take care of me. And he is at the appointments. And I know he is special because even the doctors say to me, you don't realize your husband is so much better than so many other spouses that we see. And so I know I'm very lucky. And for anyone who is dating with disabilities, dating is awful enough. And then you add this other thing you can't help but, put into the equation, and it can really complicate things in ways you wouldn't have even imagined.
Going back to originally when you mentioned that original rheumatologist that diagnosed you with the HEDS and that it was a kind of a worthless diagnosis. I mean, was that pretty much, yep, this is what it is, off you go? Or was there any kind of treatment, conversations about, how to approach it, how to treat it?
It was really be careful out there. And even the geneticist that I saw who confirmed all the other things, I said, well, what do I do? Be careful. I mean, there's so little resources. And the only thing they'll offer to you is PT. And it's not that PT isn't beneficial. It can be. To find a practitioner who works with hypermobile people is particularly difficult because they don't receive any training on people who are hypermobile, and often physical therapy can exacerbate problems than help it. a lot. I stopped going to PT because I was having no luck with it. I ended up going to yoga, which could have been disastrous, no doubt. Like, and full warning, I did shatter an ankle in yoga and broke a couple of pieces in my spine. So don't act like I didn't get hurt. I did. I did. I didn't get hurt horrendously. And I'm lucky because I had very good yoga teachers who saw that I was hypermobile, and they were calling out the wrong movement patterns that I was doing. Things that I was doing in PT that nobody ever spotted because they weren't used to seeing someone whose hips would move out of the place like they did. They weren't used to seeing someone who at 25 had like completely bone on bone knees, right? They're not used to seeing that. Like you said, Rachel, complicated case. Right.
Yeah. Well, do you think that physical therapy, I mean, if somebody doesn't understand HEDS or the osteogenesis imperfecta, I think about putting you into physical therapy, and for me, I would worry that they would do something that would break a bone. I mean, was that something that you had concerns about? Is that they would have you do an exercise that would actually end up breaking something?
I'm sure that happened in my hand. I fell and I broke my hand, and I spent 3 months in PT. I still couldn't move my hand. I'm again, like just like with the jaw. If you broke your jaw in a car accident, and it would be horrendous and painful, there's no way. But generally speaking, you wouldn't still be sick a year later. If you break your hand, generally speaking, 6 months later, you could wash your hands. I couldn't wash my hands. Like my central nervous system sensitivity for my pain is so extraordinary that I have a hard time knowing, number one, that I am hurt because I'm always in pain. So sometimes I don't know that I have actually hurt myself because I can't tell that there's new pain involved. And even in PT, after I broke these fingers, I was going for months and months, and they were grinding, and like they had the scraping tools because they're trying to get the ligaments and tendons to kind of open up again. And I'd be in these sessions sobbing hysterically. And there are these elderly people who are in like stroke recovery, and they're fine, and they're looking at me like there's what is wrong with this lady? Why is she crying over her broken fingers? It's no big deal. But I don't know if it was either that the damage happened, but anyway, my fingers got so damaged there I have to have joint replacements in both of them now because the joints are just totally destroyed. So I don't know if it was the scraping and the yanking on the joints that actually caused additional damage, or if it was so bad that when I saw the first hand surgeon, and of course he patronized me while stroking my hand and saying, well, your fingers may not look very pretty when you're going and getting your manicures, but you'll be okay. And I was like, I play guitar. What are you talking about? I don't understand. So I definitely think PT, you can really get hurt that way. I had another friend who had a mesh put on over his kneecap after he fell, slipped on the ice, shattered his kneecap. And in PT, they were trying to straighten his knee, not unlike my hand, and they reshattered his kneecap. It can happen. And you don't have to be a bad practitioner. They're just not trained. They're just simply not trained that way, and our system isn't designed to hand out specialists, right? Because it's like, how do we provide this service at the lowest cost possible? So it's just not set up that way to help people.
So obviously the EDS causes a lot of physical ailments, but I have no doubt that it's probably a lot of mental strain as well. So can you kind of describe the mental challenges, mental and emotional challenges with living with this?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Tina. I think the mental challenges, once I was able to overcome them, it almost seemed like the physical challenges were easier, but it made me realize how much internalized ableism that I actually had, like how much your self-worth is wrapped up in being able to like get 4 hours of sleep and then still be able to go to work or something like that. Like those things that people really champion as like, you're a really tough person if you can do this. And when you have those limitations and you go, God, I must be this weak, lazy person. And once you eliminate that from your process and realize, oh, I am not lazy, I am not weak, I am not inferior, I'm not shrugging off my responsibilities, I'm simply taking care of myself. That's a big shift. And once I got there, I felt a lot better, because I spent a long time being very, I don't even want to say indignant. I was beside myself that this thing I loved so much. I loved performing. I loved dancing. I loved being on stage. But I would, for example, I was touring doing a solo show that I had, which was a stand-up act with music, and it was 90 minutes long. And I would wear high heels, and I had a clip-in hair clip, and I would do the show, and then I couldn't leave my bed for 3 days, and I didn't understand why. I just didn't, like, I was like, I just must be lazy. Something's wrong with me. Other people can be on stage for an hour and a half and not be destroyed for 3 days afterwards. I just didn't get it. And I was so upset when it felt like even the reprieve that I got, like in life, when the pain is bad and you don't feel good and nobody has any answers for you, if you can go on stage and for 90 minutes, like, all of that garbage disappears and you are free, you're soaring and you're in your element and you're doing the thing that you love the most. And then that one respite, that one reprieve from all of the pain slowly started to go away for me too. And then the last movie that I shot, I I had to be kneeling and then I had to like run, and I could barely do either of those things. And I was like, I can't do this anymore, because like I'm going to pay for this so badly in the future. And like, to tell my agents, all right, so whatever you want to send me out on, it can't involve me dancing, it can't involve me kneeling, it can't involve me walking upstairs, it can't involve me, like, this is not a life for an actor, right? So I spent 2 years being very, very angry that I could no longer do that. Like, I was just so angry and so bitter that I could not get my body, no matter what I did, no matter how restricted I was in the way that I ate and how I cared for it, and my sleeping and my this, I just could not wrangle it to behave in the way that I wanted it to. And so then I had to take that next step of that psychological of, okay, so this is the case, and you can continue to be angry about it. But it's not going to be productive for you, and certainly not going to be productive for anybody else in your situation. So instead, could you refocus that energy? And I have, and I've found the passion in my sustainability work, because I also really, really care about that. And I can do that from bed, and I can feel like I'm making the world a better place, and be able to do that without having to, bend my knees or,
Yeah.
do it. Like I'm not having, and I don't feel like I have to prove to anybody that I am doing something worthwhile. But frankly, nobody should ever have to. Your value as a human being is not tied to your worth as a citizen in a capitalistic system. Those are not the same things. But we don't get that messaging enough. And it is just a hard shift for all of us to think about, that life is not about what you do for a living. It's about life, living, actually being alive in the moment. Wow. Amazing to think of it that way.
Yeah. Just being, finding your purpose and finding the reason that you're here. And I went through, 2-3 years of the same exact thing that you're talking about, where I had to adjust my mentality, and I went through depression and all of that. And it is hard just finding that new normal and finding your worth from going through that. And I really want to talk about, I want to spend a little bit of time on your current passion, but can you real quick for me, just for our listeners, explain what some of the symptoms are for HEDS or for EDS in general?
Yes.
Just so that, anybody who might be experiencing some of these symptoms can at least check it out.
Absolutely. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, there are 14 types of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and all of them, other than the hypermobile type, are extremely rare. Those are like 1 in 10,000 kind of numbers. They're very, very rare diseases. but they are also collagen disorders. And they have genetic markers that show that collagen production in their bodies does not work the same way as it does for other people. And that affects every system in your body. So like vascular system, your blood vessels don't contract and open appropriately. So like, for example, I have a lot of fainting issues because if I get up too quickly, my blood doesn't travel up to my head fast enough. People have a lot of trouble regulating temperature for that reason. They could have blood pooling, they could have swelling in their feet, or even blue tinting, things like that. So that could be a symptom of EDS, in addition to joint pain, hypermobility. The GI tract things, people have a lot of food sensitivities. They'll often have a lot of pain and digestion issues. Like if you have trouble with your like motility, getting your food to move around in your gut, that can often be a symptom of it. EDS and those the hypermobile spectrum disorder, which is this other branch of EDS that extends further over and is what is the reason likely that we're seeing the number change of from 1 in 5,000 to like 1 in 1,000, is because there's this hypermobile spectrum disorder also that's not technically Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, but it's this similarly treated issue, and they have the same things. But the other big thing we have not at all even touched on, in addition to the blood vessels, so that could be heart valves, you could have lung issues. I have really bad asthma. People also with hypermobile EDS and HSD, they often have really severe allergies just at large. Some people I have never been officially diagnosed with MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, but mast cells are white blood cells that are meant to alert your body that there's an immune reaction that needs to happen. But people with mast cell activation, their mast cells react to things that they shouldn't. So for example, when I have trauma, I get rashes. So I have a neuroma in my foot, and I have had 4 numb toes for 2 years, and they gave me a cortisone shot in my foot to help the neuroma. I can sort of feel my toes again, but I had a horrible like open wound rash on my foot for 2 months because of the cortisone. So we just have adverse reactions. When I am very stressed out, I break out in hives. I'm sensitive to foods. I'm sensitive to food dyes. I'm sensitive to hair dyes. Like I got a perm as a kid and I broke out head to toe in a rash. So skin sensitivity is often, and other allergic reactions are also a very big symptom for HEDS. And there's some belief that perhaps the reason that HEDS and hypermobile spectrum disorder do not have, as of yet, a genetic marker is because they are not genetic in nature. It is because they are caused by an allergic arthritic reaction that the mast cells in your joints actually become inflamed with the histamine reaction, and then they degranulate. Literally, there's tissue breakdown, and that's what's perhaps causing the actual hypermobility of the joints, is that this allergic reaction is destroying the protein, since they cannot find the collagen gene to do that. So those are the big things. Then the mast cell, the GI, the pain, and then the joint hypermobility. You'll often find a lot of people with migraine too, also very common. And then there's a lot of what I would say the neurospicy community also tends to fall in that. So if you're someone who's on the autism spectrum, if you are someone with ADHD or AUADHD, any of those things, those often have this big map of constellation between GI issues, pain issues, chronic fatigue, allergies, and then the neurodiversity. Those all seem to be a giant constellation of symptoms. So if you are having any of the above, it is worth it for you to look into it further. There is now more than ever resources available. I mean, literally 2 years ago, these things were not there. There were not podcasts all about POTS or MCAS or EDS. And I think the best thing that came out of COVID is that we started talking about chronic illness. And we started talking about causes of chronic illness, including long-term infections like Lyme or COVID or Guillain-Barré or any of those other things that people, get written off and just told that they're crazy or they're a woman and they're hysterical or they're whatever, right? That long COVID basically blew open the doors, and now people are really talking about it. So you could go out and educate yourself a little bit and then come into your provider with questions and say, I'm having this, this, and this. I've read that can be, a part of these set of conditions. Can we have a conversation about that? The fact that you could walk into a doctor with that information now, invaluable to people. So if you suspect this, if you think you are on that hypermobile spectrum, or you may have any form of EDS, go and check out, there's the Bendy Bodies podcast, which is a wonderful resource from Dr. Linda Bluestein. There's a couple of other really great ones too. I can't think of any offhand, but they're on YouTube, they're on podcasts, they're everywhere. They're on social media. You can follow really great physical therapists who work with people who have hypermobility online. So they're out there now, and you can find a lot more resources to help yourself, and then be able to communicate with your provider about what you need.
Did you know Spoonful of Strength is not just a podcast? We have an Instagram page called Spoonful of Strength, where you can see clips of our upcoming episodes, learn about different illnesses, and we share other people's stories. We also have an Etsy shop where you can shop for clothing such as t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies. You can find candles and mugs and tumblers and blankets. You can find it all. We support all chronic illnesses, and the great thing is, if you find a t-shirt in our shop for multiple sclerosis, we can change that for lupus or Ehlers-Danlos or any other illness that you need. Everything is customizable in our shop. Use the code podcast for 20% off your entire order.
So you recently have gone through genetic testing yourself. What did you find out of that?
I was really keen to look more at the genetics, because when I started digging into my own diagnosis a little more, I realized that because HEDS does not have that genetic marker, at the same time that I published that HuffPost piece, a researcher at Tulane, he published a paper that is possibly linking hypermobility to the MTHFR genetic mutation, which I have 2 copies of it as well. And that has to do with how you methylate B vitamins. And so I was very curious, like, well, that's a genetic piece. So if it isn't related to a separate collagen gene, like all the other forms of EDS, this MTHFR theory sounds very interesting, and it certainly fits my profile. So that's what got me really interested in the genetics. Then they had also found one form of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, and that was also incredibly rare. I can't remember what the stats on that one was, but that's through a gene called tenascin X. And I wanted to make sure I didn't have the tenascin X gene, just out of curiosity. So I talked to the geneticist, and I'll share this story briefly too, which is, he is a very nice person, but a provider who literally does not believe that hypermobile spectrum disorder exists. Like, he believes in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but he does not believe in hypermobile syndrome. Like, he just doesn't think he thinks that's basically like a fake diagnosis, which just goes to show you could go to one doctor and they give you one diagnosis. You can go to another doctor and they give you another diagnosis. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should just be self-diagnosing. That's certainly not what I'm advocating here, but there's a reason that I say I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it's because I've had 3 providers tell me that I have. Just because one has said, no, you don't, and I don't even believe in the other thing, doesn't mean that the other 3 are wrong either. So it's challenging. Anyway, so the curiosity about the genetic testing was definitely there, and even though he doesn't believe in it, what the test ended up showing was that I do have the osteogenesis imperfecta. That was, irrefutable. And then it also showed a couple of other things. If I were to procreate, right, like there would be a couple of heritable problems that would also follow. And I'm really glad I did the testing for a number of reasons. Number one, I do think that the frontier of medicine is going to be genetically tailored. I think that we will have CRISPR going in and gene editing out T1D and whatever, I mean, like all those different things that people struggle with. I think that is on the horizon. So I'm very interested in it for that reason. And because of that, the geneticist said that, for example, when you go to 23andMe, you basically get a watermelon seed. We did one testing looking specifically for connective tissue disorders. That was like a slice of watermelon. Then we did a full exome, and that is the entire watermelon. So it's literally looking at the exterior code of the genome, because actual transpositions can happen in the exome as well. And the great thing about this particular testing lab that I went to is you pay your $1,000 up front, which is a substantial investment. But you can go to them every 5 years and have them run that exome against everything that they've learned. So I saw it as an investment in my future of understanding what could be coming down the pipeline, and knowing that genetic medicine is going to be that cutting edge, that I wanted to have my material there and to be a part of that revolution, so that should there be an intervention available, I'll be on the front lines to know about it first.
We definitely need to talk about what you're doing now, because you've got a passion here in environmental sensitivities and sustainability and things like that. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, how you kind of got into that.
I've always loved animals and the planet. I've been an environmentalist since I was a little kid, and I remember watching Bette Midler hosting an Earth Day TV show in the 90s. And I was so motivated by what she was saying. She said, you can reduce the water usage in your toilet if you just put a brick in the tank. So I ran out to the backyard, I got a brick, and then I dropped the brick in the toilet tank and I broke the toilet. So my first attempt to be an environmentalist was totally failed, but it was well intentioned. I think that goes to speak to like environmental damage in general. Like the best of intentions can cause really disastrous consequences. And so it was an interesting first lesson to me that I've always wanted to connect with animals. I know it's no longer politically correct to care about Harry Potter, but I'm like a Slytherin girl. I want to talk to all the animals. I want to be a Parseltongue. I've always known that somehow my reason to be has to do with something about helping animals, because I've always felt deep kinship with them. I grew up vegetarian. I've never eaten meat. And I was already protesting animal things when I was a teenager. And so it became very natural to me to get involved in the environmental movement. But in the 90s and the 2000s, that was definitely not the topic du jour at all. You were still on the lunatic fringe. And then starting during the pandemic, people really started to talk a lot more about that, because we were talking about wet markets and we were talking about animals and meat and zoonotic diseases and how it transfers over into our food supply systems. And we're seeing, wow, with COVID, people aren't driving less. And so our pollution in our cities is lowered. And a friend of mine had seen a job posting for Tree Hugger, which is the world's oldest sustainability blog, which is now a big publication with millions and millions of readers. But they were looking for a sustainability writer, and I wrote a very impassioned cover letter and said, I have absolutely no journalistic experience legitimately, but I know all of this material because it's been my passion for 20 years, and I would love to share my passion with other people. And I got the job, and I ended up becoming a freelance sustainability journalist. And I've covered all kinds of different things in agriculture, in animal welfare, in learning about plastics. I just finished a 12-week fellowship with an organization called Climate Base. And my project that I'm working on over the next year with that is a climate action reality TV show, teaching people how they can live more sustainable lives in a fun and exciting way that doesn't make you feel bad or guilty. And it keeps people closer to the environment, closer to the food they eat, understanding more about the products that they're putting on their bodies. And that this all, I think, ties in with my health journey, because I came to this work quite genuinely, out of my own need to care about whether there were petrochemicals in the face cream or whatever, because I was going to have a reaction to it if I put it on my skin. So I come to it from a very genuine consumer-based perspective. And so my goal as a sustainability journalist is to give that utility journalism to people and to say, you can do this and it will be a change, but it doesn't ask you to suddenly become a monk and live this ascetic lifestyle and you're never going to be able to buy anything and you can never wrap Christmas presents and, whatever crazy things people think about being an environmentalist. I want to shatter all those notions and say, no, this is your planet and those are your birds chirping outside and this is your landfill that you need to like manage over time. So how do you do that? Because this belongs to all of us. This is all our air, all our water. And if we don't care for it, everyone will get sick. And we are seeing that now. And we have a chance to stop it before it gets worse. So I hope I can bring that message of hope and excitement to people, that the tools to do that are in our hands and it's not too late.
Great. My degree is actually in environmental science. So I was like, you're speaking to my heart here with your passion and everything is just, and the education. And I 100% I agree as far as like so much pollution and things in our environment is causing the illness. I went through genetic testing trying to pinpoint this, rare cancer that I had gotten that, for no explanation. And I had 0 out of hundreds of genes they looked for. I had 0. And then I talked to my naturopath and she was like, well, really like 90+% of cancers are actually, they're not genetic. Majority of them are actually caused due to environmental factors. So it is just raising that awareness is so important for the health of everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was going to just tell you one little story to say, I love that you didn't know you had an environmental science degree. That's amazing. You'll love this. I'm writing a piece right now about this scientist in Israel. She's a microbiologist by training, and she was looking at basically the food causes of cancer that we eat so poorly. Our nutrition is just so lousy, and the nutrients in the food that we do eat are lacking because our soil has been so depleted of all of the natural biome there. Anyway, so she found a company and they are growing the world's tiniest vegetable. They're calling it quantum farming. And it's this little tiny legume, like a little tiny pea, and it grows on the surface of water, sort of like algae does, but they grow it in these tanks with LED lights, special pink LED lights to grow these legumes, and then they can just harvest it by sort of like it's all done by computer, and they just sort of scrape the surface, and they get, it looks like Dippin' Dots made of plants, like little tiny little balls, and they serve it in a little ice cream container in Israel. And she said people get it and they eat their McDonald's fries, they dip it in ketchup, and then they dip it in the little quantum vegetables, and that's how they eat their vegetables. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
God,
Wow.
that's cool.
That's amazing.
I know. Yeah.
I'm definitely I'll have to be sure that I follow you. Rachel is more of the Instagram. I'm usually the Facebooker. So as we've interviewed people, I've been trying to make sure I follow them on if I can find them on Facebook, but I may have to start digging more into Instagram too. But I definitely want to follow some of see what type of articles and things that you come out with. And
yeah, well, I want to follow you both too. This is so great.
So what are 3 easy things? I always like asking this question. I was also an environmental conservation educator and program manager for years. So I always like these type of questions anyway. 3 easy things that everybody could do to help with sustainability.
Oh, great question. The first thing everybody can do to help with sustainability is eat your leftovers. The amount of food waste, both from the farm to the store and from the store to consumers, is outrageous. outrageous. And the methane emissions caused by our food waste would blow your mind. So eat your leftovers. And if you are like me and you have MCAS issues and can't eat high histamine foods, because the longer your leftovers sit, the greater levels of histamines they have, freeze them, put them in the freezer, and then reheat them, and you can eat your leftovers. So there's no reason to not eat your leftovers. That's the first one I would say. And then the second one is understand that there's only one source of water, and it's the water that's been on the planet the entire time that we've been here. So consider your water usage, and that goes from your lawn to your showers to whether you run it when you're rather running a half full dishwasher sort of thing. Be careful with your water usage. And then the third thing I would say that you could do that majorly would make an enormous difference in just your carbon footprint at large is to just reduce the amount of beef that you consume, because beef is by far the most resource intensive food that we eat. Sad note, coffee is kind of right behind it, but we don't consume coffee in the amounts, like the ratio is not the same, but coffee also has a big footprint. However, the growing problem with alfalfa production globally speaking, and then like the rise of meat consumption around the world is what's driving this call for a lot more beef. And that is so water intensive, it's so resource intensive, and our food and water supplies are the same thing. They're not separate. You cannot grow food without water, and if you don't have water to drink, you don't have water to grow crops. So reducing the amount of beef that you consume, even just reducing it down, makes a substantial amount of difference. In fact, the difference between like eating less beef and eating no animal products is almost negligible. So you definitely don't have to go crazy and be a vegan like me to make a really tremendous difference in your footprint.
Mm-hmm. Such good advice. It really is that easy. I mean, you're exactly right. And people think that you have to go to the extreme, but if everybody did just 3 things, it can make a huge difference. So we definitely want to follow up with you and ask, where can people follow you? We would be happy to link any of articles that you would like to share with our audience. We will definitely link your Instagram page, but can you tell us a little bit about how they can follow you, where they can find your stories and everything?
Absolutely. I'm trying to be more engaged on Instagram. That's generally where you're going to find me, and Threads, because I do think there's some good conversations happening. And I think there's a lot of community actually being built, especially around the chronic illness and chronic pain communities. So I actually do like that. And of course, the environmental movement is very big on social media. So I'd love to connect with anybody on Instagram. You can also subscribe to my newsletter called Animal Matters, which is a newsletter about uplifting stories about life on a warming planet. And I share not just my journalistic writing, but other essays about environmentalism and the planet, and other fun things too, music and dance and games and, just fun life stuff. And then you could also go to my website, giamora.com, and see all the back catalog of everything I've published and shows I've written and music videos I've released and things like that. So you can kind of see the whole array. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found your IMBD page.
Oh, yes. There's there too.
I would love to see videos of you singing. I bet you have a beautiful voice.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I'll come on. I'll do a separate episode where I'll just respond all my answers in singing. It'll be like a little opera.
There you go. There you go. Well, and we may have episodes in the future where we talk more about this. So we may be knocking on your door for future advice for our listeners. So just thank you for coming. We know that you had a rough day yesterday. I hope that you continue to rest and that you feel better. And we just can't thank you enough for coming on here today.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing these stories and giving everyone a platform to share them. And thank you for sharing your stories. And I'm very sorry for your loss, Tina. I'm sorry to hear that. And I hope that you're recovering from all of that. And I send you both the best and good health to you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a crazy story, and of what she went through. I just can't imagine growing up and having bones break. So like I've never had a broken bone before, so I just can't imagine just breaking a bone from something as simple as accidentally banging into a wall or something like that. That's just
Yeah. 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 It's crazy. I think I've only broken my toe and I don't even count that. So, but
there was one time I remember
no,
thinking I broke it because it hurt so bad, broke a toe, but I ended up, it wasn't even broken. So I just can't
yeah.
imagine the pain of a broken bone. What a
Well, not just
warrior.
one, but yeah, all the ones that she spoke about. I mean, from her what I've read and just from what she spoke about, I bet she's had over a dozen. I can
Oh, I
imagine.
know. Yeah. Yep.
And I'm shocked as a child to have so many broken bones that somebody didn't think something else was going on, but that was probably, probably late 80s and times were different then. But she really with all that she's been through, she just seems like such a positive person.
Environmentally conscious person too. It's just so this day and age, it's just so important to have that environmental consciousness.
And I'm so glad that she found an outlet when, she said obviously with COVID in 2020, being an actor was not something that she was able to do. And she found her passion in sustainability and is able to be a writer, which is something she loves to do, and add that to her passion. And it's like the perfect outlet for her to share her stories and everything. Just a beautiful human being. And just, I really enjoyed talking with her. I don't know about you, but I think I could have talked to her for another hour or so.
Oh, I know. I could
But
have. That was one that it was hard to hang up just because she's just such a, she's a great speaker, great,
yeah,
communicator. And so
very
it's just
eloquent.
somebody that was very easy to talk to. So we will be sharing, all the many ways of, following Gia. Her website, her Instagram. On Instagram, she has this great article on HuffPost, and so you can find the link on her Instagram page for that. Threads, she's on Threads, YouTube, LinkedIn. She has a newsletter, and all of those will be shared here in the comment section of the best way to follow her and her mission on raising environmental consciousness and sustainability.
And I need to tell you, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I went on her, I think it was her YouTube, and she is a wonderful singer, and some of her songs are about sustainability and the earth and things like that. And they're wonderful songs. I mean, very ingenious, and she's got a wonderful voice. So if you guys like music, and she's got some great videos on there.
Yeah, it's great. I'll have to check them. I have not checked her music videos out, but I'm definitely going to be doing that here. Our next episode on Tuesday coming up will be on supporting people with chronic illness. So if you have a family member or close friends or that that you're just not sure the best way to help support them. You want to do something, but you don't know what they need. This is a great episode to tune into. And we're also talking with Dawn, which is one of the founders of Cards to Warriors, about their program of sending out cards to those with chronic illness, the healthcare workers, the support system, just to help uplift. It's a great organization and a great and simple way to possibly help show some support to those that you love that are going through a chronic illness. So be sure to tune in on Tuesday for that episode as well. Thank you all for joining us this week, and we will see you next week.
Before we let you go, take a moment to listen to Gia's song, Take Some Action to Get Some Action. You can view the video on her YouTube channel. It's a fun video showing a number of sustainable behaviors, and it's really cute. So make sure you go onto YouTube and check out the video as well.
Show me you're a winner, order a speaking dinner, we'll feast on eggplant and on peach. You wanna earn my love, slap on a rubber glove, let's get the plastic off this beach. But before we get too close, before I let you in, just know that I won't fake it. You gotta prove to me that you can take it. Gotta take some action to get some action. Gotta take some action to get some action. To get some action. Ooh, you gotta, baby, turn off the light. Let's don't pollute the night. Just let the moon shine on our deed. We'll wash up in the shower, save water and save some power. 5 minutes, babe, is all we need. So take it from this hottie, I care what's on this body and I care what I put inside. So if you're in my place, making out with my face, showing you care, that's bona fide. And ooh, if we all did a little, we could all benefit a lot, doing the best that we can to keep the temps from rising too hot. But before we get too close, before I let you in, gotta make a good impression, gotta help the planet win. Before we get too close, before I let you in, just know that I won't fake it. You gotta prove to me that you can take it, take it, take it. Gotta take some action to get some action. Gotta take some action to get some action. Gotta take some action to get some action. Ooh, you gotta take it, take it, take it. Ooh, you gotta take it, take it, take it.